Okay, cool. So thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Kat. I'm the Vice President of the Trinity College Dublin Neuroscience Society. And today I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Simon Clark, who studied physics at St. Peter's College at University of Oxford, and then went on to do his PhD in theoretical atmospheric physics at the University of Exeter. During his time at Oxford, he created his channel, Simon Ox Phys channel, where he focused on helping students with applications and showed insight into the life of a Oxford student, and then moved on to creating videos about the physics of atmosphere and the cryosphere. Currently, his YouTube channel has over 325,000 subscribers, over 25 million views, which is incredibly impressive. He also received multiple awards for his science outreach. And today he will give us all some advice on how we can improve our science communication so that we can communicate our research in a more effective way. So basically, if I could ask everyone, if you have any questions, then just send them in by the end. We'll have a short Q&A. Okay, super. Thank you so much, Simon, for coming. I'm just going to stop my video now.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. That intro made me feel far more important than I really am. Right, let me just start sharing my screen. Cool. Okay. So yeah, today I really don't need to introduce myself. Kat's done such a good job. I'm going to be talking to you about how I guess I approach science communication. And to be clear, this is digital science communication. So this isn't going to be talking about writing a book or working in TV or in films, because I don't have any experience of that. So what we're going to be focusing on is doing science communication online, and we'll break down what the kind of the different forms that we're considering as part of that, and we'll talk about, I guess, my philosophy, how I approach doing this. So disclaimer, your mileage may vary. This is just how I look at this subject, just because it's worked for me, this is the classic survivor bias, right? It's like listening to lottery winners saying, just liquidate your assets, just buy all lottery tickets. It worked for me. Of course, you only hear the successful ones. So this is what has worked for me, but please do put a big asterisk on it and realize that this is just my personal experience. So you've already heard the intro of me, just to briefly sort of say who I am. I started making videos in 2010, and as you already heard, I originally specialized in doing outreach videos. So I went to Oxford as a relatively unusual applicant. I went to a state school. I'm the first member of my family to go to university. And so when I was applying to Oxford, I found that there were no video resources out there that would help somebody apply. And when I was applying, the most useful interaction I had with anybody from the university was just a 2-email, I think, conversation with a student who was already there. And that boots on the ground kind of perspective, being able to ask those basic questions of, do I need to be able to speak Latin? Are they going to kick me out when they realize that I went to a state school? Those kind of stupid questions. Being able to ask that to somebody was super valuable. And so I started making these videos to effectively be that person at Oxford to a broader audience. So to provide that boots on the ground lived experience. And over the years, that kind of morphed. I received a scholarship in 2015 to create educational videos from the Foundation to Decrease World Suck, which is the Vlogbrothers educational foundation. And since receiving that, I've made a whole variety of different kinds of content. Going from top to bottom, you've got my series showing what it was like doing a PhD. The middle video there is, I think it might be my most popular video now, actually, which is about the planets of Star Wars, which ones could really exist using atmospheric physics and astrophysics, which was the first video I did following completion of my PhD. And then that bottom video is kind of a mix of the two, really, which was the science of my PhD thesis. And I've been doing this full time since 2018. So my background is obviously in YouTube, but I have done science communication to different extents sorry, I just realized my cat's snoring. It is very adorable, but we're gonna stay focused. Sorry. She's very cute. So yes, I'm mostly on YouTube, but I do also stream on Twitch, and that's the thing actually I'm most excited about at the moment in terms of sort of the stuff that I do online. And I do host a podcast. It is terrible. It's called the WikiCast. If you're going to listen to an episode, the one we released today is. You can start there if you want. We talk about an erotic photographer. Yeah, so this is mostly YouTube, but with that little caveat, we'll talk a little bit about those other sort of formats too. So the kind of progression or the descent of my content has gone from this kind of video of me saying, right, I'm going to make videos about my experience living at Oxford. And then when I finished my undergraduate and I went to Exeter to do my PhD, I basically just carried on doing that. But this time it was me talking about my research. And that sort of got me into talking about science and actually doing science communication rather than more of a vloggy type focus, which is what it was at Oxford, but for, you know, kind of different ends than just fluffy vloggy content. And then, as I said, post-graduation, I thought, well, I'm actually really enjoying this video thing, and I didn't have anywhere near enough of a following. I didn't have anywhere near enough views to turn it into a full-time job, but I knew I would regret not trying to do it. So that first video came out after I submitted my thesis, and it went on over, interestingly, it had a very slow start, but over the years it went on to be this big success. It was indicative of this kind of content that was not really focused on my lived experience, but being more about the science being potentially viable. And then over the past 3 years now, it's been sort of variations on that style of content. So this is one example about this claim from climate change deniers that there are more polar bears now than there were in the past, and so climate change therefore can't be real, which incidentally, just for the record, is not correct. There are like 2 populations of polar bears that have increased over the past 50 years. And it's like a classic case of cherry picking data. That particular video is actually something that we will touch on a little bit later, but it's an example of what I call a Trojan horse video, where it's targeting an audience who are expecting to be told about this grand conspiracy about climate change. And in fact, there's a little cohort of Greek soldiers inside with, you know, the truth and real facts. So that's the kind of content that I've been making mostly over the past couple of years. So there's been a variety of forms of science communication, and because this is a presentation, you've got to have a definition in here. Science communication aims to enhance public scientific awareness, understanding, literacy, and culture by building these awareness, enjoyment, interest, opinion forming, and understanding responses. Now, I would contend that there is a very big difference when it comes to science communication online between educational content and informational content. I think that most people who are doing science communication are doing informational content. And to take in a good friend of mine, Brian, who runs a channel called Real Engineering, he is an example, I think, of doing informational content really well. And that satisfies the awareness part of the awareness criteria of science communication. I think that there's almost like a hierarchy here, which is the awareness of something being a thing. So his video, for example, on how, let's say, the SR-71, this fantastic plane, was able to go so fast, there is a benefit to people being aware that that plane exists and aware of the technology that it used. But I think a kind of higher up the hierarchy would be an understanding of how that plane was able to function. And then ultimately, kind of at the top of the pyramid of the hierarchy would be the literacy. So what I mean by literacy in the context of science communication is enabling somebody to assess a claim or assess a report or a paper, whatever it may be, and contextualize it in the broader field, both their knowledge of it, but also the potential for the knowledge that is further out there, and giving them the tools to critically disseminate the information and establish, right, okay, where does this fit in with the rest of the field? Can I trust this information? Does this change my opinion or perception? I think that's really hard to do in science communication, but it can be done. But what I try and do in my work is to try and kind of scale that hierarchy. I'm not content with just giving people information, but raising people's awareness of a particular subject. And I think as science communicators, you should strive to do that. I don't think you should sit back on your laurels and say, well, you know, people are now aware that Mars has 2 moons called Phobos and Deimos. that, may enrich your life, I guess. It may feel like you are part of the scientific culture a bit more because you have that knowledge. But talking about that in the context of other planetary bodies and their moons, why does Mars have two moons? Why are they so irregularly shaped? Why does Earth have one? And why is it so big compared to the Martian moons? That indicates a level of understanding. And I suppose also in that example, a little bit of literacy. And I think that has a lot more value. We're offering a lot more value to society by going beyond just awareness and talking about the understanding and the literacy. But that said, there is, of course, a place for people being made aware, particularly at lower science capital audience, people being made aware of topics. So that's my rant over about the difference between informational and educational content. In terms of how we do this, just to briefly touch on these, I've already said that this is digital, it's not real life, so to speak. It's URL, not IRL. And I kind of break this down into posting on social media, making videos, podcasting, and live streaming. There are other forms, but this is my personal expertise. So just to very briefly go through these different forms, for each one of these, I've given an example or two of what I think are really good examples of this. So social media posting is the easiest way of doing science communication if you're already on a platform such as Twitter or Instagram. Depending on the platform, of course, you will engage with your audience in a very different way, and the style of content that you will make will be very, very different. I personally think that there is a huge value to be found in social media, using social media in the context of science communication for reasons that we'll go into a lot more later. But the brief version is that I think it very effectively allows you to contextualize scientific knowledge and the scientific methodology within human lives, and it makes science less of a thing that it's like a marble statue that just falls out of the sky. It's actually a human endeavor. It was built, it was chipped out of a raw block of marble. Seeing that process, I think, is really important, arguably more important than seeing the finished statue of scientific knowledge. Some good examples of this. I have a friend, Simon, it's a great name, who is a meteorology PhD student at the University of Reading, who basically puts out lots of figures from his research, looking at what the atmosphere is doing at a given time, looking at how climate change is affecting different areas. He does really good figures on his social media that he also uses for other means. I think he's a really good example of this. Reddit, which I guess you could argue is a social network, it's, there's lots of different names you could call Reddit. The subreddit Data is Beautiful is probably the best way to see how people interact generally with science communication online, because not only is the subreddit, it's a subreddit, so you can rank it by how many upvotes different posts get, so you can see the very top ones over a course of, say, a year. But what you can also see is in the comments how people are interacting with it, so the questions people are asking, the takeaways that people are getting from it. And you can see, especially if you know the field, for this group of people, if you know a lot about medical science and you see a figure that is about medicine, then you can say, right, well, I'm coming at this with a certain level of background knowledge, but a lay audience is taking this from this, which isn't what I expected. And that's really valuable as well, sort of getting that visible feedback. Moving on to videos, just to briefly rattle through these, because I'm sure that a lot of you here watch a lot of online video anyway. I break them down into three categories. You've got video essays. So this is your classic kind of YouTube science video, like Kurtz Kasak's Real Engineering, Brian. 3 Blue 1 Brown, possibly the best example of this. That's basically a voiceover, normally, paired with some kind of relevant imagery that takes you on this educational journey that, gives you this information. And in the case of 3 Blue 1 Brown, I think this is a really good example of it, actually gives you that higher level of understanding and literacy. Some people, I think, are more content with just giving you the facts. 3 Blue 1 Brown is a great example of how to go beyond that. These, if you are interested in making videos, are probably the easiest type of content to make. Generally, the only requirement is to have decent audio, to have a good quality microphone. We can talk plenty about equipment at the end of this session if people are interested in recommendations. I'm a bit of a gearhead, so I'm very happy to talk about that. For this kind of content, it's very easy because audio is generally cheaper and easier to achieve than video. And if you are conscious about being on camera, then you don't have to be. CGP Grey does these videos where it's just his voice and stick figures, basically. actually. I think I don't even know what software his first video was edited in. It could have been Microsoft Paint for all I know. But if you are telling a compelling story and you have good voiceover equipment, then you can make this look incredibly professional very easily. Video blogs, where I got my start, a bit more complicated. You do need to be on camera, but you don't have to have expensive equipment. You can use a phone. I think there's actually a very strong argument to just use the simplest equipment and do it as simply as possible. But of course, in order to be a successful vlogger, you do have to have a certain on-screen personality. You do have to perform, basically, and you do have to edit it in a more complicated way. If you want to see how to vlog, go and watch Casey Neistat's old stuff. He's like the king of vlogging. But if you want to see this in a kind of science context and do what I was speaking about earlier, this task of contextualizing scientific information, Andrew Dotson does this at the moment. He's a physics PhD over in America. You also have my inferior videos from back when I was younger. And you can sort of see how this can be done. Then lastly, for the videos, you actually kind of can combine the two, and you can do feature videos, which are way beyond, I imagine, what most people here would be interested in doing in the short term. But if you are looking for kind of aspirational content for what is possible to do with science communication, check out How to Make Everything, I think is a great example of this, where it's both on-screen talent and also voiceover with stock footage. It's kind of every technique thrown into the mix, and they're basically short films. Lindsay Ellis is another great example of this, as is the Great War Project in World War II, which is going through those conflicts week by week, 100 years on. But yeah, this is definitely beyond, I think, what most people would be interested in, but it's worth seeing what can be done. Now, actually, on the other end of the scale, if you are not interested in the production at all, but you are thinking, right, okay, I want to do some science communication. I want to help people understand this subject that I'm interested in, but I don't know how to do the production. I'm not really interested in that. A very viable option is to do consulting. So you can consult and be on camera. If people have watched 60 Symbols, Periodic Videos, Numberphile, that type of thing, their videos are basically just an expert talking to camera and explaining something in an engaging way, and they'll put graphics on it and make it look very nice. But if you don't want to do that, you can also assist a channel that has fantastic production on it, like Kurzgesagt, for example, probably the best channel on YouTube. I've done some consulting work for them when they talked about climate change, for example, where they will reach out and say, you are an expert on this subject. Can you please check this script for us? Sometimes they'll even pay you to do that. Although I will say, if you think, oh, that sounds fantastic, I want to do that, it is kind of a case of who you know rather than what you know for this type of thing. But if you put yourself out there on social media, then that is how you kind of raise your profile. And often people will put out, when I've done this in the past, for example, I've said on Twitter, like, I want to do a video on this topic. Can anybody recommend somebody to talk to about XYZ? And then people will reply saying, oh, I hear this guy's good, or I hear this person is good. This is their Twitter handle. So making yourself more broadly known is quite an effective way of doing science communication via video without having to make the videos yourself. Very briefly, podcasting. I will be very honest, and I don't think I've heard a single good science communication podcast. I think plenty of people have tried. The closest that people have come, I think, would be the science-themed episodes of 99% Invisible, which is a podcast really about design. But when they talk about science subjects, it can be very interesting. I just put this in because it is technically a thing you can do with science communication. I think it's far more interesting to talk about live streaming. Live streaming is like the wild west of the internet right now. There are so many people just experimenting with what you can do with the format. It is currently almost exclusively used for gaming, particularly on Twitch, which is where I stream. I actually did a stream today, which wasn't gaming, because people on Twitch are now starting to branch out into doing things like art and music and cookery and science. I actually did a stream today that was just me working with a Pomodoro timer and encouraging people to do the same. Tomorrow, I'll be doing a stream where I'm coding up a climate model using Python. If you do try, and I would encourage you to, if you're considering doing this as science communication, you do have to choose a platform. Lots of places have live streaming now: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitch. Personally, I think Twitch is the best because the community on Twitch, I think, is a bit more mature. YouTube comments in particular, I'm sure everybody has looked at the comment section of a YouTube video, and they're often a massive dumpster fire. And it's even worse with live streaming. You don't tend to have that on Twitch. On the downside, you don't have the discovery that's quite as good as YouTube. You'll often see live streams recommended on YouTube, and on Twitch, you generally won't. It's a bit more difficult to organically grow. But there are very few people doing science communication. So when you stream, and there will be a category that's science and technology, and you can add an educational tag to it, to your stream, there will be a handful of people doing it. So if you can stand out by doing something that's really interesting, and you're very genuine and genuinely passionate about your subject, and especially if you can think of an interesting way to do it, very limited competition means you can grow very quickly. The examples I give here, Climate Fortnite is actually a fusion of the two. It's this fusion of science communication and gaming. It's a bunch of researchers talking about their research whilst playing Fortnite. On the more kind of explicitly science communication side, you've got Professor Melko and Physics Office Hours, who are two well, one's a professor, one's a PhD, both in America, who do streams that are almost like a variety hour of science. They're experimenting with the format, and there's nobody to tell you no. Viewers are responding well, so they keep innovating. And eventually, I'm sure somebody's going to hit on a format for Twitch live streaming and science communication that's going to really take off. So if you're coming to this session wanting to, be inspired to try and do something new, this is where it's at, I think. Okay, so that's all of the kind of platforms and the format. So we know what we're talking about, basically. I'm sure most people came to this wanting to know, how can we do this effectively? I'm aware of all the platforms. So my philosophy when it comes to science communication is actually very simple. You can literally you can do it in 3 words. Education is storytelling. What I mean by that is, when you are educating someone, when you are communicating science or history or whatever it may be, you are telling them a story, because a story is nothing more than a sequence of information. It's a series of plot points that follow one another in logical order. And that's what education is. If I want to tell you about Phobos and Deimos, say, Mars's moons, then I can, you have the information of, right, we're in the solar system, which contains 8 planets, rip Pluto, and one of those is Mars. It has these 2 moons. Those 2 moons are lumpy and potato shaped because they're captured asteroids. And, it goes on from there. It's a story. And we'll talk more about how to do that effectively in just a moment. But I think it's important to stress that this is great news, because you have a century of people using the visual medium, and I guess when I say a century, I mean the moving image, to tell stories. So if you're interested in doing things on YouTube or on Twitch, you have a century of narrative and non-fiction films to draw inspiration from and to draw guidance from about how to do effective storytelling. And by watching both good and bad films, you can learn so much about how to effectively convey a story. And that is something they say in film school, apparently, you actually get more out of watching bad films than watching good films. Because when you're watching a good film, you never really realize what they're doing well until they stop doing it. It's like how special effects look great until there's one shot that suddenly realize it's fake, and it kind of takes you out of the movie. Up until that point, you were perfectly happy, but you didn't learn anything from that. You would have learned from that one special effects shot, like, oh, they didn't light that properly. And that tells you so much more. So, don't just watch the Citizen Kanes and Metropolises and Chicken Runs of this world. You've also got to watch The Rise of Skywalker. And, you've got to watch films that also tell you what not to do. And in fact, just consume everything you can. If you're going to, this is one of the key takeaways from this talk, is consume widely, consume lots of different formats, different styles, good, bad, everything, because you will learn from doing it. So I would break down, as much as possible, a century of doing this, although this isn't limited just to cinema. This is true, I think, of all storytelling, into 2 rules. The 2 rules of good storytelling, and so good education, and so good science communication, is to break down your stories into therefores or buts, but never and thens, and also to use meanwhile back at the ranch. And I'm going to put my hand up here and be completely honest and say I stole this from an excellent video from the really sadly discontinued YouTube channel Every Frame a Painting. This video essay on how to structure a video essay about Orson Welles' F for Fake is like 4.5 minutes that you will not regret spending. But I'm just going to try and represent this to you, but that video does it very, very well. So to break down these points, firstly, therefore or but. What this means is to break your story into beats. And when I write videos, I'll do this in bullet point form. I actually used to use, before I started using Notion, which I'd encourage like every student to use, I used Post-it notes. I'd literally write story beat on the Post-it note, stick it on the wall, and then write out all the information that I want to convey, and then put them up on Post-it notes, and I could rearrange them such that between every beat or every Post-it note, every beat of your story, you must be able to put the word therefore or the word but. If you can put and then between two story beats, then the story is not structured properly. And what I mean by that is, if you break that story down into beats and you say this thing happened, and then this thing happened, and then this thing happened, and then this thing happened, that's like how a primary school child tells a story. It's not engaging. It doesn't cause you to be invested in the story. But if you tell this story of this thing happened, but this thing happened, and then therefore this thing happened, but this thing happened, it's suddenly so much more engaging. I hope everybody's had this experience at least once in their life. I had the best lecturer of my life, a guy called Stephen Blundell at Oxford, do a lecture on how to cook a chicken. And it was the best lecture ever because it did this. It introduced this problem at the start of the lecture. How do you cook a chicken? And it used this idea of, okay, we're going to cook a chicken, but the chicken is spherical. Therefore, we can use this kind of symmetry. Therefore, we can apply our equation to this, but we have no way of solving this problem. Therefore, we need to introduce this new bit of maths. And the way that he structured this was so compelling that this happened in 2010, and I'm still thinking about it 11 years later. So being able to do this is, like, I think, the fundamental way to tell a good story and the fundamental way of engaging your audience. This is like the thing to take away, I think, from this talk, is to break your story into beats and make sure that you're not putting and then between any of those beats. The other thing, sort of to briefly talk about this, is a phrase from Alfred Hitchcock. Basically, meanwhile back at the ranch means that you split your narrative into multiple threads. You bring one of them to maximum tension, and then you drop it. And then you move on to the next thread, and you bring that to maximum tension, and you drop it. And then you repeat over and over again, and then your final act, if you like, you bring all of those threads together. And when I say act, I mean the 3-act structure of basically set up your pieces, do something interesting with them, introduce a problem, and then resolve that problem, learn from the experience. This is very difficult to do in short form content. This is definitely something that's much more suited to, say, feature films or novels or long form documentaries. But it is possible to incorporate this in shorter medium too. That's like a classic structure. I've spent a fair bit of time trying to learn about story structure for exactly the reasons I've described. The education is just storytelling. So another structure that might be of interest would be the hero's journey, from the Hero of 1,000 Faces, where if just to return to that lecture idea, you can chart where we went on that lecture in this diagram. So you're called to adventure, you're introduced with this problem. You then go from the known into the unknown of, right, we have to introduce this new maths, which was Fourier series. And you are introduced to a helper, you could always say, which is Joseph Fourier. And then you have this revelation of, right, we need to apply this math in this particular way, which transforms you to this new level of understanding. And so you return to the problem, but with that new understanding, you are changed. And you are kind of back where you started, but yeah, you're this changed individual. You've gone through your hero's journey and you've learned on the experience. This may sound very grandiloquent and wanky, but I honestly think that this is how the best science communicators do this. It's something I try to do in my work, and I don't think I do it very well all of the time, but I'm constantly trying to do it. I mean, I would put this as a spoiler for the end of the talk, but it's really not. The fundamental thing, I mean, I've said that there's that fundamental rule of storytelling, but the fundamental rule, I think, of making this stuff is you just got to make it. So the hardest bit of criticism I was ever told was, you accept the fact that the first 100 videos you make will suck, but if you don't make those sucky videos, you won't get to the good ones. And so when I say that, I try to do this, but I don't think I do it very well, I know that, you have ups and downs, but as I try and implement this scheme more and more, I'll get better at doing it. And the stuff that I make will be more effective at communicating ideas and communicating science. And this was probably all going to sound very, grandiloquent. It's all going to sound quite difficult. And how do I apply this? And that's because it's a complicated thing to do. If this was easy, everybody would do it. The only way to get good at it is to try it. The only way to make good stuff is to make stuff. So just to, sorry, I went off on one there. Just to kind of give you an example here of how to apply this, in case people are sort of still struggling conceptually with it. Spoilers for a movie that came out, oh my God, it came out 40 years ago. Spoilers for The Empire Strikes Back. You can think about it, think about these two rules, right? So let's say that you are in the middle part of the movie. The Battle of Hoth has just happened. And so Luke has gone off to Dagobah. Why has he gone off to Dagobah? Because he wants to be a Jedi. Therefore, he goes to Dagobah, but he crashes his X-Wing into the swamp. Therefore, he can't escape. But he meets this creature who tells him he can take him to the Jedi Master Yoda. Therefore, he goes with him. Maximum tension. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the Millennium Falcon is being chased by Imperial forces. Therefore, it goes into an asteroid field, but they get trapped in this cave. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Luke is training on Dagobah, and so on. You can see how these sort of fit together. I'd encourage you, if you find this stuff interesting, to try and apply this methodology to other films or other pieces of literature that you like, and you see this pop out really clearly. I should say that this is like the main way of doing it. There is an alternative, which is the J.J. Abrams method of doing it, to withhold information. The way that he describes this is you present your audience with a series of mystery boxes. This was inspired by a box of magic that he had as a kid. And I think the story goes, he has a TED talk where he talks about this, that he had this magic box and he never opened it because the idea of what was inside was far more compelling than actually opening the box. So if you wanted to apply this kind of logic to Star Wars, then say take it to the first film, right? You have the spaceship at the very start is under attack. We don't know why it's under attack. The droids have to, sorry, I really hope no one's not seen Star Wars. I might be ruining everything for you. This is just the start of the film. Two droids go from an escape pod away from the forces. They land on this planet. Where's the planet? Fast forward a little bit, they get found by, they get bought by Luke Skywalker. R2-D2, one of the droids, tries to escape. Where is he going? Who is Obi-Wan Kenobi? You're constantly trying to string together these mysteries to keep your audience engaged. They have to try and do that without frustrating them. And personally, I don't particularly like this approach of storytelling. And I should say that, like, if you're going to take storytelling tips from J.J. Abrams, some people don't like the stuff that he does. Let's put it like that. Like, it has this issue of you introduce so many mysteries, but then you actually have to resolve them at the end. And if you don't, it's really not satisfying. But okay, that's kind of like the how. I think we got, like probably 10, 15 minutes. So that's what and the how. And now I kind of want to go back a little bit to the what, but incorporate a bit of the how as well and talk about format. So for my money, format is the most underthought part of structure. And when I say structure, I mean this writing of a script for your idea that you're trying to communicate to your audience. The format is the picture frame, right? It's how your audience is going to interact with the story that you're telling. And understanding the format is going to be crucial to using whatever format you choose as effectively as possible. Like, I don't know if people have seen this. This is Las Meninas by Velázquez. It's in the Prada in Madrid. It's a huge painting. I was shocked when I first saw it because I've only seen it online like this. But I can't remember the exact dimensions, but it's like 10, 12 feet tall. And the size of it impacts how you interact with the piece of art, as does the literal frame, as the fact that it's a non-ornamental frame. It's black, it doesn't draw attention to itself. How would you perceive this picture differently if it was in a large ornate gilt frame, for example? And then again, going to sound like a stuck record, if you want to do this effectively, you've got to consume in order to create. Now, again, this is kind of like highbrow. I apologize. Please do bombard me with questions after this if I felt like I've lost you. But I think this is really important, this stuff to do with format. And I guess, you know, human culture is fractal. So you could go down an absolute rabbit hole in this talk of, you know, what kind of media are we making? Are we making something that's live, or are we making something that is on demand? Okay, let's say we're making something that's on demand. Is it to be seen on a small screen or a big screen, or is it designed to be portable? Is it designed to be shared? I'm not going to go down all the rabbit holes. I just want to talk about the basic concepts here. So when talking about format, first of all, ask yourself, and we'll do a worked example at the end of this if this still seems a bit too kind of highbrow. What does your audience already think about your topic? Or perhaps even what does your audience think they know about the topic? And what does the audience already think about your format? I feel like a lot of people will ask themselves that first question without even thinking about it. It's like, right, I'm going to do a video, in my example, say about climate change. Right, okay, what do people already know about climate change? Or what do they think they know? But I don't think people would often ask themselves, what does my audience think about the format I'm going to use? So, for example, what do they already use this format for? What conventions inform are they? In other words, what are they expecting from a piece of a media that is created in this format? And when I say format, I mean a YouTube video or a Twitch stream or a podcast. How does my intended audience already watch YouTube? What kind of content are they going to be watching on YouTube? How are they going to watch it? Is it going to be on a screen? Is it going to be on a TV, on a phone? And that's, you know, I don't overthink it and explicitly think it, I guess, to this degree every time. Perhaps this is where I could improve further by doing that. But have these questions in your mind and ultimately ask yourself, how can you use this information to better convey the story that you're trying to tell, you know, to better convey the information that you're trying to communicate to your audience? This is when I was making my PhD vlogs, for example. I knew that the audience I was trying to reach would be people at sixth form and undergraduate. And these are people who will be watching vlogs as just an idle form of entertainment. Oh, you know, like I'm gonna put this on in the background whilst I fold clothes, or I'm gonna eat lunch, or whatever it is. It's not something that's like, right, we're gonna get our pencils and our graph paper and we're gonna make notes on this. I'm not expecting to learn when I sit down to watch a vlog. So what I wanted to do with the series was to take that, almost taking your audience when its guard is down and saying, right, you know, I'm going to educate you about this, but I'm not going to draw attention to it. But by people watching the vlogs, it's educating them about how graduate school works. It's educating them about how my particular field works, you know, the actual contextual information. That's a completely different audience to, as I already mentioned, this kind of Trojan horse approach of, right, I'm going to make a video about climate change and it's going to be on YouTube, and I'm going to try and reach the people who are interacting with climate change on YouTube in a climate denier space. They're going to be looking for videos that confirm their ideas that climate change is wrong or a liberal conspiracy or whatever. And so making that video with a thumbnail and a title, and spoiler, I didn't mention this earlier, but if you are interested in making YouTube videos, thumbnail and title are the most important things about your video, arguably more important than whether the video is good or not. But designing the thumbnail and title such that it would entice that audience based on how they interact with the subject matter, but also how they interact with that subject matter on that platform in that format. And this kind of falls under, if I'm allowed to try and coin my own terminology, I would call this the Blair Witch effect that's at play, particularly with regards to the vlogging stuff. So for those of you who don't know, the Blair Witch Effect was this horror film that was released in 1999 that was meant to be found footage. It was these students who disappeared into the woods, and this tape emerged, and you know, people were sharing it around online, and the marketing of the film encouraged people to believe that this was really found footage and there's something really creepy going on. And the fact is that people found it scarier because they thought it was found footage, even though they probably knew it wasn't. but by voluntarily suspending their disbelief around the format. And, you know, they really did this really well on this project. They shot it on a camcorder that a student would probably take to the woods. They didn't have any kind of lighting rigs at all. The sound was crap. The video quality looked crap, but that made it look more genuine. And so it allowed people to voluntarily, perhaps not even voluntarily, suspend their disbelief in order to be more entertained by it. And I think this is particularly relevant for this style of personal video content. So I already said that for the vlogs, it's almost like catching your audience with their guard down. It's saying, right, well, I'm going to engage with this content and it's a vlog, so I don't need to think about this. This is somebody's life as they're depicting it. And along the way, you can actually educate somebody without them even realizing it. I hope at this point, if there are people in the audience who have seen my PhD vlogs, they're going, oh my God, like I did not, you know, I didn't realize that was how he was making us learn about PhD school. But I think this is particularly relevant for that kind of thing. And I would also apply it to stuff like Instagram stories. This is the first generation, and when I say that, I basically mean if you're under 30, which I'm not anymore. This is the first generation where people are creating and consuming the same format for the first time. Like the majority of the stuff they create and the majority of the stuff they consume is the same, which is video. If I were to ask people here, when in the past 2 weeks, have you made a video on your phone or with a camera? And that includes Snapchat, Instagram, WhatsApp, whatever. I would bet that the majority of people here would say, yeah, I have in the past 2 weeks. And so that informs how people interact with that kind of content on Instagram, on WhatsApp, on, if it's a vlog, on YouTube, because they assume that, well, I make this kind of content. So, you know, when I make this is just me living my truthful life. So when I watch a vlog, well, that's just somebody living their life. I'm not going to actually critically assess whether this person is telling the truth or not. So you could actually use this very nefariously, and I'm slightly worried that that's what's going to happen over the next kind of 10 years. But you can use that for educational purposes. You know, you can use that for somebody not actually having their guard up in relation to a particular subject, like for me, for climate change, for example. By combining climate change with doing vlogs about personal content, it made something that might have seemed inaccessible purely because of how somebody viewed the subject matter. But when framed in that particular format, it allowed people to engage with it. And yeah, I think you could use that for good or ill. And I'm basically imploring you to please use this power for good. I'm conscious that I've actually gone on for longer than I intended. But just to give you a worked example of kind of bringing together everything, I did a video a little while ago called Why Sign and Cos Don't Mean Anything. It turned out, by the way, this video was really successful, like way more than I expected it to be. And it's because that Arabic word on the right apparently is a swear word in, I think it was Bahrain. And so lots of people were commenting that like I came here because of the thumbnail, and I had to find out why. But in terms of what, you know, how would I approach this video? The format, I knew that I was going to be making a video essay because that was just that was like the peg in the ground. I was going to be making a video essay form, but I was actually going to be on camera. And that would involve smart sounding person, basically, I have an English accent, telling you smart sounding things about maths, about STEM. And I knew I wanted it to be like 7 or 8 minutes in length. So, right, okay, how is my audience going to perceive that kind of content? I picked the 7 or 8 minutes because I didn't want people to think that this was going to be like a slog, one of those videos where like, oh God, it's like Philosophy Tube's released another 40-minute video. I've got to sit down and like make notes. Like this is meant to be something that people can come to and still learn a lot, trying to ascend that hierarchy of science communication, but not feel like they need to, but not make it feel serious, I guess. And in terms of the content, we're talking about maths. So, you know, right, okay, I know how the audience is going to interact with the subject matter, but how are people, sorry, with the format, hopefully they're going to be people who are like, oh, you know, that's a smart sounding person saying smart sounding things. I like to feel smart, so I'm going to click that video, and it's only 7 to 8 minutes. So, you know, it's not that serious. But in terms of the subject matter, people hate maths. Like in school, I hated maths. I've got a PhD in maths, technically. So you're going to get people saying, wait, hang on, you know, Sign and Cos don't mean anything. I've been lied to this whole time. I'm going to, you know, vengeance click on this video. And also at the same time, nerd snipe people like me who know a lot about maths, and, you know, to be told, hang on, wait, what? Sign and Cos don't mean anything? hang on, I've got to learn what he means by that. You're actually kind of double dipping. You're getting both ends of the spectrum. But that was why I constructed the video to be of that length in that format with that title, basically, by assessing what do people think about the subject and what do people think about the format, how are they already using it, what content are they already consuming. And then to sort of go through how I wrote the video, I broke it down into these points. So sign, you should watch the video after this. This is just like the first few points. Sign was originally the word jiva from bowstring, but that was bowstring in Sanskrit, and it had to make its way to the West, which it did via Arabic, because this happened over 1,000 years ago. Therefore, it was translated from jiva into jiba. But when you write something in Arabic, you can abbreviate words by omitting certain vowels. Therefore, jiva became jub, but this technique only works if you know the original word. Therefore, I won't spoil the ending. That was basically me with, and I did do this one with post-it notes saying, right, these points on a post-it note, and then rearranging them and making sure and taking them away and rewriting them such that I could put the buts and the therefores between them. So hopefully that kind of brings everything together a bit, and it makes people, it shows you what I mean when I say think about subject matter, think about the format, and break it down into a story with these story beats. Oh, would you look at that? This is a summary slide. I definitely remember this presentation. So first of all, most importantly, education is storytelling. Like that's one of the big things I really want you to take away from this. And in doing that, break down the message you're trying to convey, you're trying to educate people with, into therefore or but, never and then between the points. You can also, if you're doing longer form content, do meanwhile back at the ranch, sort of keep people's attention. Or if you prefer, you can do this mystery box approach of giving people these mysteries and constantly leading them on, like trail of breadcrumbs style, with one mystery after another. The other thing which I would really like you to take away from this discussion of communicating, and I suppose this isn't really science communication explicitly, this is like education more broadly. In order to do that effectively, you've got to consume stuff as broadly as possible in order to create it as effectively as possible. The other thing, which is potentially something that you might not have been told before, is to think critically, not just about the subject matter, but about the format that you are using, whether that's Twitter or Instagram or video essays on YouTube or a live stream on Twitch. How do people already use that format? What do they think about it? What kind of content are they used to consuming? But as I spoiled earlier, the most fundamental thing about if you want to learn how to do this stuff effectively is to do it. You've got to get those 100 sucky videos out of the way so you can make your first good one. I've made, over the course of my career doing stuff on YouTube, I think I've made like 500 videos now. And I think it probably was like the first 300 that were terrible because I'm a slow learner. But I only got to the point where I can sit down now and apply this technique quite quickly. Over the course of an afternoon today, I wrote a video and broke it down into these beats of therefore or buts and making sure that it was engaging all the way through. Only able to do that because I tried to do it hundreds of times before and failed and gradually got better at it. But there you go. That's like the take-home points. Thank you very much for listening. I really hope I haven't bored people too much. Please do like, comment, subscribe, smash the like button, all that kind of thing. And if you'd like to follow me on socials, then that's my those are my handles. So with that, I'll stop sharing the screen, and Kat, I'll hand over to you. Thank you for listening.
Perfect. Thank you.